This is the Earth Science Classroom, guys, and we're looking at erosional agents, in this case looking at wind in particular. Now, wind and ice and glaciers and water and streams and rivers, they act in similar ways. For example, same as a stream or a glacier, the wind can carry or transport the weather material, but it can do it in different ways. So it can actually suspend and have a lot of material actually suspended. We call this the suspended load, where it's actually held in the air and it moves with the air without really touching the ground, but it's going to hit anything the wind comes in contact with, like a elevated piece of terrain. Or also you could have where you have the piece of material bouncing on the, basically in the air and bouncing, coming off, bouncing like this, and this is called saltation. Okay, now saltation is not really in terms of the dissolved ions or salt concentration, it just comes from the Latin word meaning to jump. So it jumps off the ground and is then basically pushed along with the wind. So looking at abrasion, abrasion can also be called sand blasting. If you get the kind of idea and visual sense from that word, is you get the material carried in the wind. So we have material in the wind, and it's generally prevailing in a certain direction at a certain location at a certain time, maybe season or basically depends on the climate. But you have a consistent wind carrying this material, and one of the things that it does is it starts to carve. It starts to carve its way through the materials and the terrain. And over a long period of time, it can reshape and create new features on the Earth's surface. For example, there are two things. There is a ventifact, and we also have a yarding. Okay, two of these features are basically produced by wind erosion. Now, a ventifact is a piece of rock on the surface that has been smoothed and polished by the wind in certain angles, in certain directions. It could be a similar, very same direction, or it could be a change in direction based on the climate and the location. But what you get is you get the surface of the mostly arid or dry regions, and you get this rock that is, a bit higher, and it starts to get shaped and angled. And the wind's coming from this direction, and it starts to smooth off. And if it changes direction from this direction, it will then change the angle and smooth off different parts of the rock. So you get this singular rock that's smoothed off and polished, like it would be in a very large stream or river, but it was in a very dry area. That's caused by the wind. Now, a yardang or yarding is a little bit different. It's usually a larger ridge of more resistant rock. And it's, again, on the surface, but you have this larger rock, and it basically, the wind is coming from this direction, and it basically carves around this larger rock that's more resistant, and the more softer, less resistant rock will be removed quicker, leaving this isolated kind of like by itself larger smooth piece of rock. So we have abrasion, which is the impact. And it can cause different features. But also we have deflation. Deflation is the removal of loose material, and it's generally going to be smaller, lighter, less dense material that is loosened by weathering processes. Again, usually in an arid or desert kind of environments. Otherwise, we discuss the water action rather than the wind, or a combination of both. So deflation can have a particular feature be created on the terrain in the environment, and this is called a desert pavement. What happens is you have this area of land, this desert, that has all large bits and small bits, large bits and small bits, as like a combination, right? And over time and consistent wind, what you have is you have this land that has been, you remove all of the smaller bits, and then you're left with this concentration or sequence of larger pebbles, boulders, rocks that are just accumulated together because of one thing. So you could have obviously gravity will play an effect. Also, the maybe occasional floods, flash floods or flood waters would then push all of these rocks together and deposit them. But you'd have this kind of like changed, consistent, larger boulders terrain that we call a desert pavement. So these are the effects of the looser, smaller material being taken out first, leaving behind the heavier ones. So we looked at the two types of erosional agents in relation to wind, so abrasion and deflation. So we can use this in the classroom to show them how students how these materials are moved, and we can show examples and pictures and images of the southwest of America and areas like Arizona and Utah and parts of California where they have these beautiful formations and the soft sedimentary rock that's been lifted up through uplift in the Colorado Plateau and the national parks, all show a good example of these features in real life. But also you can look at examples and case studies. So what I like to do is look at first look at sandstorms. It's rare that you'd have a student in America or certain parts of the world that would have, an idea or experienced a real sandstorm, unless they come from areas, Africa, Middle East, maybe parts of Central Asia, where they have the occasional sandstorm. You wouldn't have much idea what it is. You may have seen it in a movie or documentary, but you wouldn't really experienced it, and you can really show them, the beauty and the sheer force, and the issues that come along with sandstorms, in terms of air quality, in terms of visibility, in terms of the dangers that can be presented when you have this cloud of sand just engulfing the whole area. And, the issues, the scope, the frequency, also bringing a bit of geography and the locations, a bit of the culture and what people do, and how they live with these things in terms of the dumping of sand on agriculture. So you can really connect different topics, subjects, lessons with this case study. Another one I like to do, which brings in a lot about history and anthropology, and also the agricultural revolution, basically, is the 1930s Dust Bowl, which includes a lot of wind erosion, a lot of removal of the soil and topsoil, the changes in agricultural techniques of people in the Midwest, in northwest Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, who, since the development of the West and the opening up of these states, people were given land by the government, more land, therefore able to produce more food and want to produce food for others and make it more of their living than just sustain their families. And they would over cultivate the land, over tillage the land, and you had this, basically this decade of soil erosion and wind and dust storms that would cause havoc in this area, causing a mass migration of people, mostly towards California, in search of work and search of farming practices, and obviously to get away from this change in landscape and soil quality. All right, so we've looked at a lot of things in this video, and I want to basically make sure that you understand that you can break this down and put this into one lesson, a couple of lessons, add in the case studies, the images, the videos, and really show the students the different ways that wind can have effect, because we don't really appreciate wind if you don't live in these arid or desert areas to see the effect in long-term wind exposure and the amount in which it can erode the terrain and create these features. Guys, like this video, please subscribe, add a comment, it'll be great, and we'll see you soon.